My name is Gulanes. In this video, I'm going to show you what is ARD, what are the components of ARD, why is it ARD is important, what ARD looks like, and what are the basic steps to create an ARD. So please keep watching. Thank you.
Entity Relationship Diagram. Now, Entity Relationship Diagram. ER diagram stands for Entity Relationship Diagram, also known as ERD diagram, that displays the relationship of entity sets stored in database. In other words, ER diagrams help to explain the logical structure of database. ER diagrams are created based on three object concepts. So first, entities, second, relationship, and third is diagram. ER diagram contains different symbols. Rectangle for entities, and then oval to define the attributes, then diamond to define the relationship. At first look, ER diagram looks very similar to the flowchart. However, ER diagrams includes many specialized symbols and its meaning make this model unique. The purpose of ER diagram is to represent the entity framework infrastructure. Now, why we should use the ER diagram? First, it helps you to define terms related to entity relationship modeling. Second, provide a preview of how all your database should connect, what fields are going to be on each table. Third, helps to describe entities attributes relationship. Fourth, ER diagram are translatable into relational tables which allow you to build database quickly. Fifth, ER diagrams can be used by database designer as blueprint for implementing data in specific software application. Following are the main components and symbols in ER diagram. Rectangle. This entity relationship diagram symbol represents entity types. Then ellipses symbols represent attributes. Diamonds, this symbol represent relationship types. Then lines, it links attributes to entity types and entity types with other relationship types. Primary key, attribute are underlined. Double ellipses represent multi-valued attribute. So as we see in this picture, they have different shapes. This is the example of ER diagram. For example, in a university database, we might have entities for student, course, and lecturers. Student entity can have attributes like roll name, and department ID. They might have relationship with courses and lectures. So entity name, attributes, verb phrase. So in the entity name, it can be the name of person, place, object, event, or concept about which data is to be maintained. In the attribute, property or characteristic of an entity. In the verb phrase, association between the instance of one or more entity types. So we have an example, car and student. In the attributes, the color of the car and the name of the student. In the verb phrase, blue cars belongs to student Jack. That is the basic example of ER diagram. Now, what is entity? A real-world thing, either living or non-living, that is easily recognizable and non-recognizable. It is anything in the enterprises that is to be represented in our database. It may be a physical thing or simply a fact about the enterprise or an event that happens in the real world. What is example of entities? Person, employee, student, patient. Place can be store or building. Object can be machine, product, and car. Event, sale, registration, renewal, and the concept, account, or code. So, in the entity set of a student, an entity set is a group of similar kind of entities. It may contain entities which attribute sharing similar values. Entities are represented by their properties, which also called attributes. All attributes have their separate values. For example, a student entity may have a name, age, class as attribute. So in this example, a university may have some different departments. All these departments employs various lecturers and offer several programs. Some courses make up each program. Students register in a particular program and enroll in various courses. A lecturer from specific department takes each course and each lecturer teaches a various group of students. Now, what is relationship? Relationship is nothing but an association among two or more entities. Example, Tom works in chemistry department. Entities take part in relationship. We can often identify relationship with verbs or verb phrases. Now, what is weak entities? A weak entity is a type of entity which doesn't have its key attribute. It can be identified by considering the primary key of another entity. For that, weak entity set need to have participation. In the above AI diagram example, trans number is a discriminator within a group of transactions in ATM. Now, what is attribute? The single valued property of either an entity type or a relationship type. For example, a lecturer might have attributes time, date, duration, place, etc. So, in the diagram, we have different attributes: type, amount, transaction. Now, there are different kinds of attributes: simple attribute, composite attribute, derived attribute, or multi-valued attribute. So, what is cardinality? Defines the numerical attribute of the relationship between two entities or entity. Now, what is a different type of cardinality? One-to-one relationship, one-to-many relationship, many-to-one relationship, many-to-many relationship. So, this is most likely what cardinality is. In the first, mandatory one. Second, mandatory to many. Optional one, optional. What is one-to-one relationship? One entity from entity set X can be shaded with at most one entity of entity set Y and vice versa. Example, one student can register for numerous courses. However, all those courses have single line back to that one student. So every student has one course. Now in the one-to-many, one entity from entity set X can be shaded with multiple entities of entity set Y, but an entity from set Y can be shaded with at least one entity. Class, student. For example, one class is consisting of multiple students because in every class there have so many students. Many-to-one relationship. More than one entity from entity set X can be shaded with at most of one entity of entity set Y. However, an entity from entity set Y may or may not be associated with more than one entity from entity set X. For example, many students belong to the same class because in a class there are so many many-to-many relationship. One entity from X can be associated with more than one entity from Y and vice versa. For example, students as a group are associated with multiple faculty members, and faculty members can be associated with multiple students. Now, how to create an ARD diagram? Now, in this ARD diagram tutorial, we will learn how to create an ARD diagram. Following are the steps to create an ARD diagram. Entity identification, relationship identification, cardinality identification, identify attributes, and create ARD. So, in this diagram, we have 5 steps to create an ARD. So, for the step 1, so in this example, in a university student enrolls in a courses, a student must be assigned to at least one or more courses. Each course is taught by single professor. To maintain instruction quality, a professor can be delivered only. So step 1 for the ERD diagram, entity identification. We have 3 entities: student, course, and professor. Now for the step relationship identification. We have the following 2 relationships. The student is assigned a course. Professor deliver a course. Step 3, cardinality identification. For the problem statement, we know that a student can assign multiple courses. A professor can deliver only one course. So, this is most likely what diagram looks like in the step 3. For the step 4, identify the attributes. So, you need to study the files, form, reports, data currently maintained by the organization to identify attributes. You can also conduct interviews with various stakeholders to identify entities. Initially, it is important to identify the attributes without mapping them to a particular entity. Once you have listed attributes, you need to map them to identified entities. Ensure an attribute is to be paired with exactly one entity. If you think an attribute should belong to more than one entity, use modifier to make it unique. So in the entity, we have student, professor, and course. For the primary case, student ID, employee ID, course ID. And the attribute, student name, professor name, and course name. So this is most likely what look like in a step 4 for creating ERD. For the step 5, a more modern representation of entity relationship diagram example. So this is how the step 5 look like. That's all. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. God bless.